Hello, everyone. Welcome to yet another AfricodeX event. I'm very excited about this topic or this panel because I'm not a software engineer in tech. So very excited to have Makinde and Andy joining us today. Let's start with introductions. So Andy, do you want to go first? Maybe quickly introduce yourself, and then Makinde can introduce himself as well.
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Andy. I am a site reliability engineer at Google. Joined the company in 2018, mostly in IT support space. But as of last year, I switched over to SRE. Been doing it for about a year now on one of our ads platform teams. So I think maybe that's enough intro for now. I can expand later if we need to.
Sounds good. Makinde?
Hey, I'm just going to follow the same format. So my name is Makinde Bamigboye. I joined Amazon in 2018. I am a cybersecurity engineer. I actually moved from Canada for the job, so to the US here for the job. And I have been here now for about 2 years and I think 10 months, thereabouts. And yeah, I guess that's enough intro for now as well.
Cool. And for those of you that don't know me, my name is Adebisi. I am the founder of Africode. I'm really excited to be here today. So we have a couple of questions for the panelists. I'm going to go through some of those questions. If you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat window, and probably at the end, I will open it up for people to come off mute and ask questions, okay? So let's start with, you guys are in the tech field, but you're not necessarily software engineers, right? So how did you get into this career path, right? So let's start with you, Makinde. How did you get here? Like, did you want to be a software engineer and this just kind of happened? Like, tell us how this happened.
Yeah, so originally I wanted to be a network engineer. Of which I was a network engineer. At the time, all my education was in networking. I had my master's in networking, and I started out trying to be a network engineer in the IT field and working my way towards it. And just when I finally became a network engineer, a mentor who I had known a couple of years, had a position in his company for a security analyst and kind of asked me if I was interested. And at the time, I don't turn down opportunities to do interviews, so I kind of was like, oh sure, let's give it a try, and I went for it. Had the interview and got the job, and yeah, and then ever since then, that was about 5.5 years ago, and ever since then I've been in the cybersecurity field.
That's so interesting. So what do you actually do? Like, what is your role? Give us a little bit of a snippet of like, what is security? Yeah.
So in cybersecurity, I think one of the good things I like about it is the field is very dynamic. I don't always know what I'm gonna do every day. Kind of have an idea, but so to start out would be typically I would have a project like most companies working on security, either a security initiative or working with a team that has a product and trying to make sure the product they want to put out there is secure. But all of that can change if the bad guys do something and everything is on hold, and then now you're like on all hands on deck investigating and things like that. So that has happened a few times, or not a few times, quite a lot. It does happen a lot, especially on Fridays, just enough to ruin your weekends. And yeah, that's kind of like the day-to-day on the average for the most part.
Got it. Thank you. And then Andy, tell us a little bit more about like the space you're in at Google, and how you got into this. Is this something that you're like, oh, this is what I wanted to do, or did you just kind of mistakenly land into it?
Yeah, I think it's definitely the latter. I definitely sort of walked into it type of situation. I didn't actually know SRE existed prior to joining Google. It was a completely new field to me prior to that. But I spent most of my my career in IT support space for various companies. So naturally, when it was sort of time for me to progress into another role, I considered network engineering. I did explore a few certifications in that space, CCNA, for instance, but I didn't actually take it. But I did spend a good amount of time on sort of hands-on infrastructure stuff. so servers, networking equipment, and things like that. I got the opportunity to join Google in 2018 to sort of do IT support for the company, and I just figured that would sort of be the continued path of my career to just sort of progress to that scenario. But I think 2 years, so actually maybe a little less than that, I found out about SRE. One of my teammates had joined SRE and sort of talked about their experiences and what they went through, interviews, and just in general what they do day to day. So it piqued my interest, and I sort of started exploring that space a lot more. And fortunately for me, I had a lot of resources at the company, especially the African community. A few of them were
at Google, you mean?
At Google, correct? Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
At Google, a few of them were already in SRE. Some were network engineers, but I sort of leveraged their experience and sort of what they had gone through, and sort of made my way into SRE around this time last year, actually. So it was a bit of a non-traditional path into SRE, but that's sort of how I arrived there.
Yeah, so first of all, for those that don't know what SRE is, which I think is what you're saying, what is SRE? And tell us a little bit about the day-to-day. What do you actually do as an SRE person? Google.
So SRE is Site Reliability Engineer, and there are two main ladders in SRE. There's a SWE ladder and there's an SE ladder. I'm on the SE, which is System Engineering ladder. Where we spend most of our time, and I think this is probably mostly true for most of SRE teams, is we focus on reliability of the platforms we support, the systems.
Okay.
Sustainability of the long term, making sure things don't crash and burn, right?
Okay.
SWEs are mostly focused on features and getting
Wait, what is SWE?
SWE.
Software.
Software.
Right.
Yes. Sorry, the acronyms, I'll throw them around a lot. The SWEs are mostly focused on just pure feature releases and things like that. They build the fancy stuff that you see day to day, and we just sort of stay on the back end and make sure things don't break when they release these new features. So we're sort of we don't like calling ourselves sort of the guards of the gate, but we sort of have to sort of play that role to make sure that the system stays reliable in that sense. So that's split between SWE and SRE. I agree. Well, there's a little bit more to it, but that's the general idea. So day to day, I spend a good amount of time on monitoring systems on our monitoring stack. I do a lot of I work quite a bit as well on capacity management. So just overall, making sure our systems are reliable in the long term. We have enough resources to launch the new products coming, down the pipeline. There's quite a bit of documentation involved in SRE, mostly for system designs in general. So if we want to make changes, you spend some time making sure you document it, people approve it before we proceed with that. And generally, when things break, we have to spend some time writing postmortems and making sure that it doesn't happen again. So that there's a good chunk of time in that space as well.
Cool. So interesting. So again, I really like this because I, started off my career as a software engineer, and I've literally gone all the way to the business side of the world. And I really believe in tech, you don't necessarily have to be a software engineer. I'm such a big evangelist about that. So tell me a little bit about, do you feel pressure to be a software engineer? Do you feel like that's like the cool thing to do in tech? Do you feel pressure? Do you feel like you're going to eventually be a full-time SE like software engineer? Do you think that that's what you're going to do eventually, or is this good enough for you? And then Makinde.
Yeah. I'm sorry, was that for Makinde or myself?
Yes, no, you then Makinde.
Got it. Yeah, I think for me, I never quite felt the pressure because I never pursued the software space. I was sort of in IT support. Though naturally, when you tell people about IT, they ask if you're a software engineer, right? But I never really saw that as an ultimate goal. And it's even more true now that I spent some time with software engineers. I don't quite envy their work personally. I think my experience and generally my interests don't align with that suite of engineer work pattern. So personally, I don't think I will go that route. But I don't feel that pressure either. So that probably works out for me.
Okay, sounds good. Makinde, you?
No, I don't. I don't feel pressure. I never felt pressure to be a software developer. Actually, when I was in school, this was back in Nigeria, the certifications that kind of were top at the time were the Cisco suites of certification. This was the days of CCNA, CCNP, CCIE, and they were the
No.
biggest things at the time.
Okay. Sorry, CCNA, like what does that mean?
Oh, it's the Cisco certified
Got it.
network and network CCNA network associate, and then CCNP network professional, and CCIE is network internetwork expert. So
Okay.
those were the biggest certifications at the time in my space, and those were the things that I saw day to day, not necessarily the software developers. So that was kind of always what I wanted. There was at the time I was in school, there was never a pressure to want to be a software developer, and coming into the real world as well. And I've been working, for a few years here. I've grown to appreciate what software developers do, but I don't think I'm ever gonna go in that space.
Interesting. So out of curiosity, what do you want to be long term? Like say 10 years from now? And the answer could be I don't know, but I'm just kind of curious. Like as you see your career starting from this non-software engineering field, what are you trying to accomplish with your career 10 years, 20 years from now? Makinde and then Andy.
For me, I want to. I think if I stay in the IT field, which I don't know, never know the future.
Yeah.
But if I stayed in the IT field, my goal would be to, to continue to help companies build safer systems. So probably would want to end up as a consultant, as a global consultant, just going to assessing different networks and different softwares and applications and companies networks, and trying to point in the gaps to them, or probably coming in to kind of fix issues when, if things ever go bad, or I guess when things go bad. That's probably going to be the ultimate way I would think for myself, maybe in the next 10 years.
Cool. Sounds sexy. You would not find me in that space. Andy, you?
Yeah. I think with what I know now, I'd probably assume I'd go down the path of leadership just in general in the space. Maybe team lead or something along those lines. I don't think I'm quite the people manager, but sort of some sort of lead role in sort of a team that focuses on reliability or something along those lines.
Yeah.
I do spend some amount of my time in mentoring and teaching as well. So I would expect to maybe develop a little bit more in that space, especially back home in Africa and a few other places, just focusing on sort of the underprivileged, and then building that base a little bit more too.
Yeah, no, I like that. I mean, that's why I started Africode, right? Specifically for that reason. So I guess let's shift gears a little bit and talk about what it means to be a Black person in the field that you're in, or an immigrant in the field that you're in, right? So Andy, starting with you, are there a lot of people like you? And by that, I mean Black people, Africans in your field. Are you always the only of your kind, if you will?
Yeah. I mean, I think I can only go as far back as since I joined Google, I guess, which has been 3 years now. So I think, fortunately for me, I haven't been the only person. There have been a few ahead of me. So I've sort of had those shoulders to stand on and sort of make good developments and progress in that space. But I think if you break it down to sub teams and within your PA, or within, I guess you're trying to think of another term for PA outside of Google, but within your within that, I think there's definitely you do realize and you do feel that sense of you are the only one, as far as you could see in sort of larger meetings as well. There's not a lot of representation there. And I think for what it's worth, it's not that it's a bad thing, though, that there's a fundamental issue with that. I guess that's a separate conversation, but it does make you sort of appreciate opportunities that you've had, and sort of just makes you want to give back to others who didn't quite have the same. So that's sort of been a bit of a different, I guess, perspective for me.
Yeah, and can I double click on that, Andy? Like, do you feel like there difficulties? Like, just because it's not like a plethora of people like you, yes, there's one or two other people, but like, does that pose issues, difficulties for you as, you know, an SRE at Google?
I think it does to some extent,
Right.
naturally. And I guess fortunately, I've found like sort of folks to rely on, folks I can reach out to outside my team, outside of my PA, outside of like my org altogether. So I've been fortunate in that space as well. But I think yes, ultimately, yes, that I guess that's bottom line. That's,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And you, Makinde, you've also had a very interesting path, right? Nigeria, Canada, here. And I'm curious, even in all of those kind of situations, were you the only person of color, Black person, you know, African immigrant?
In a way, yes. At the same time, no. There is. I mean, when I've worked at smaller companies, yes, probably the only Black person or the only African immigrant. When But then in the bigger scheme of things, at bigger companies, there's always been maybe one or two people, you know, who are also in the security field or in the IT field, you know, close by. But at the same time, we're so small that you know, it's easy to kind of bond because we know each other. Like in my building, in the entire building, we're only two, you know, who are Africans and Blacks, you know, so it's kind of easy to know each other and you know, kind of just bond together. But yeah, but then yeah, I'm not the only one, but at the same time, we're not a lot, so it still feels like you're alone, you know.
And when you say you're building now, I'm assuming you're in Seattle because you said you're Amazon. Is that correct?
No, yeah, but I'm in Minneapolis.
Minneapolis. Okay, so you're in the Amazon office in Minneapolis, and there's only two of you. And I think that kind of makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm assuming because Amazon is Seattle. That's my assumption, is that correct?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
right.
Okay. So like how do you deal with the difficulties though, right? Like I think for me, I've always been the only. In fact, if I see anyone else, it's kind of a wow, hi, how did you get here? You know, like it is so strange to see someone else, especially a woman of color, kind of where I am. And so like with the difficulties, like how do you handle those? Or do you just not pay attention to it? Because sometimes I don't do it. I don't pay attention to it.
Yeah, I mean, there's sometimes where you do ignore them. I do ignore them. There's some other times where they are I'm not just limited to Amazon. I mean, looking at my whole career, like there've been different times where you know, depending on the issue, one of the biggest one is just usually culture change, right? Like maybe just little things, you know, body language things, like you know, earlier in the career, I had a issue with accents and then maybe just things like, oh, you look down or you cross your hands when in a meeting and you know, there's someone who feels like, oh, you're being not receptive to the feedback or something, you know. There are those sometimes there's that little bit of culture shock or culture change where just talking to people and mentors have been great to help out, and some other times you just get to learn to, you know, you kind of have an open conversation with whoever that person is, and then you kind of come to a compromise, or like, oh, that's not what I meant, this is just how it's been for me,
Right.
and all that. But there have been some tough ones. I mean, like one of the biggest ones for me in my career was this was way back when I just started. I was super junior. This wasn't Amazon or anything. I was working for a consulting company, and we were consultants to other smaller companies. This was just general IT, not even security. So they had an issue, I remember, in the company with, I think, Wi-Fi, and they had sent about two engineers who were relatively senior to me to go fix it, and they couldn't. They kind of fixed it temporarily, and then the issue happens again within like a month. So this time they sent me, and then I went into this meeting, and the Wi-Fi box was in the boardroom, and in this boardroom the CEO of the company was there. So I walked in, and he was having a meeting with someone else. Actually, the IT manager walked me in. So I walked in and, you know, kind of did the work, and then I kind of explained to them that, hey, you need to change this because of all these issues, and where you're located is where your Wi-Fi is located is bad. That's why you're cutting out and all that stuff. And everything was fine. And then, like, I think the next day or 2 days later, my manager called me and said they don't want me working for that consulting company anymore. And I was like, what? Well, what's the reason? And they said the CEO has a problem listening to you. He just didn't like you in the boardroom and everything. And I was like, and I was just taken aback. So I kind of stepped back and I didn't say anything. And like a week later, I walked up to the manager and said, I'm really concerned about what you told me the last time. I was like, you should be standing up for me in that conversation with the CEO. You should be telling him it's either he takes his engineers as they come, or you stop being a consultant to them. And obviously it was a money conversation, right? So they weren't going to do that, and the conversation kept on going on. It got, at that point in time I was fed up, so it got aggressive. And the HR came in, and within, I'll say like a month or two later, I kind of told them I was done. I was like, I can't keep working here, for that. So depending on the challenges, you would some are just too much to take. You just have to kind of either pull out and be like, I'm done with this, or kind of escalate it. And some other ones are just relational. You just kind of work with someone. But yeah.
Wow, that I mean, my blood is boiling right now. I'm going to keep calm. Jesus Lord, that is something. Yeah, all right. Let me just get back to script before I go off topic. Because that is just it's very, very unfortunate that we have to deal with this type of I would say insult in the workplace. But there's a lot of all those things. There's microaggressions. There's things that are in your face like that. So, we have to deal with them. So let me just take a big step back, right? Because I don't know if I asked this question. Did you study computer science in university? Like, how did you prepare yourself for a world, Makinde, in this, network space or security space?
No, I didn't do computer science in school. I did a course called in Nigeria, it's Information Communication Technology, ICT. At the time, I've always kind of wanted to be the outlier. So I remember applying to the college, to the university, and there was the way in Nigeria is when you come out of secondary school, you're like a science student. So you kind of, once you're in the science state, you kind of have to stick to science. So like your options are kind of limited. You either have to be a chemical engineer, mechanical engineer, electrical engineer, computer science, and then you go to the sciences, which is like the biology, biochemistry, and all that stuff. So technically, I was kind of limited to just engineering because I knew I wasn't gonna do well in anything biology. So I looked at the options, and I kind of didn't want any of them. The closest that I was willing to do was electrical engineering, and if not, then I was gonna do this ICT. At the time, it was super new. There wasn't, it was kind of like, I've never heard of this before, but it happens to be in the engineering department. So sure, let's do it. And, got into school. And so it was like a mixture. It was like a mixture of electrical engineering and computer science. So they kind of mixed the courses and just kind of put you right in the middle there. And then there's something called internship, or everybody, I guess it happens here too, but the internship IT back in Nigeria. So I went for IT at AIT. I was doing my IT at AIT then, and I was in the IT department, and then I started getting used to networking because they had a relatively big network and they had all these Cisco switches and routers, and you had to configure them and all that. So that was when I kind of knew, okay, I want to focus and narrow down into networking, and then I came to Canada to do a master's in networking. So kind of just went down that path.
So no computer science. That's very interesting. Andy, what about you? Did you study computer science in college, or SRE? I don't know.
Yeah, I guess you could say I studied it in SRE because I did information systems at college. So I've only actually done 2 years of college. I was like, I'm going to work in the field after that, go back after I figure out what I actually want to do. I guess maybe I haven't figured out what I want to do yet because I haven't gone back. But I think I did take one coding class. I think it was Java or something along those lines. And I almost failed the hell out of that class. And that was the last time I ever taken those classes. But it just didn't, I think it pulled me off right off the beginning of what computer science actually wasn't what other options there existed. It's possible I just had a bad experience in that class. But after that, I never went back. I never showed interest in taking another computer science class. I just sort of stayed with the information technology stuff, and I think some part of business and things like that. But yeah, I never actually did computer science. But I mean, since then, I've had to do some courses, I guess, on and off here and there, but nothing in an official capacity.
So let me get this correct, Andy. You don't have a bachelor's degree today, but you work at Google.
That is correct, yes.
Wow, that is so impressive. So do you plan to completely, do you think it's necessary? Because now we're getting to a question about education and the validity of education, right? You know, your parents will be like, go get your bachelor's. And some people will say, go get your master's. And some Yoruba parents will say, go and get your PhD, right? So do you think that you will go get your, complete your degree? And if you're not going to, or even if you are, do you even think it's important that you do?
Yeah, I think, like you said, to my mom and dad, that's a question of when are you going back, not if you're going back, right? I find that every time trying to justify why it's probably not worth my time or something like that. But I think I will go back for something down the line, and not just for the sake of having a degree, but at that point, I probably want to take a more skillful interest in something and spend some more time in that space. But I think it's it might be a bit of an outlier for me in this case, being able to work at a company the size of Google and be able to sort of get through all the checkpoints without a bachelor's degree. And that's probably because I came through the IT program, and maybe that might have been a loophole, but they didn't require you to have a bachelor's degree to get in the IT program. They call it a residency. So the requirements are a bit more laxed on that, but after that, you sort of have the opportunity to move around if you can. So that was sort of the path I took, and that was definitely unplanned. So that was a bit fortunate, a bit of luck, I think you could say.
Wow, I'm like, where the hell did I spend all that money on school? So what is the IT program for those people that are listening? Like, for those that are still maybe in school, I'm like, oh, I can do this. I can do what Andy is doing. What is the IT program?
So Google has a few programs called residencies. They're generally 2-year fixed-term programs where they take recent graduates, quote unquote, and sort of put them through a specific program and try to build them for their SWE pipeline or IT pipeline or network engineering pipeline. So those generally tend to have slightly, I guess, the minimum requirements are a lot lower in terms of education and requirements. But I think generally in that case, you have to make it up in experience, certificates and things like that, which they may not ask you purely to show your certificate in CCNA or that, but you have to be able to sort of articulate yourself in that conversation to be able to prove that you do have the knowledge and the experience. So I think the requirement of having a bachelor's degree still exists. I think at Google they're a bit more lenient and sort of allow you to be able to express yourself in other ways besides showing a degree, right?
So interesting.
That's a bit of a good news there.
Yeah, very, very eye-opening. Very eye-opening, honestly. Because honestly, sometimes I think about education and the future of education. And if honestly, the next generation, by that, my children's generation, if going to a school like Harvard or Cornell is going to be like a big deal then, or if honestly just getting a degree online is going to be enough for you to be successful in life. So I really commend you, honestly, for taking that approach to do 2 years, go to a company like Google, figure it out, and maybe you will go back and, do whatever you want to do with your life. I honestly commend that. I wish more people did that. But for those that are listening, getting a bachelor's degree is still a good thing, right? It's not that it's not. I think Andy is saying that he was lucky in this sense, but I do envy you, Andy. So with that, you don't have a degree, and this question again is to Andy and then Makinde. How do you train yourself continually? What are some of the things that you do to make sure that you're still, top shape for doing your job day to day?
Yeah.
Andy and Makinde.
Yeah. I think just to couple of the last point, that everything else being said, I still strongly believe in getting a formal education of some sort, right? I mean, nowadays there are different avenues to sort of getting that knowledge. So sort of staying the course and doing that is still useful. It would have definitely cut a lot of, I guess, years of my being in the field, sort of just trying to figure out what I want to do, right? If I'd stayed in school, I probably would have figured that out a lot sooner, or maybe not. It's just, it just happened to be one way instead of the other one. So I think staying on top of knowledge acquisition and things like that, I think maybe this might be because it's Google and a few other places, but there are tons of resources to be able to gather knowledge in any sort of field you want to sort of pursue. I have spent a lot of time in Grow courses. That's sort of our internal portal for education and things like that. So I do spend a lot of time in that space. When I was picking up coding, I did bother quite a lot of people to get coding interviews, mock interviews, and things like that.
Yeah.
That was something I was relentless, with, was making sure I got a lot of people who were way ahead of me to sort of give me the mock interviews and sort of give me the guidance that I sort of needed, because I didn't have like the formal education. I didn't have that structure in my mind to approach it. So I relied on other people's experience to do that. But yes, that I definitely do spend at least a few hours a week learning something. Or
right.
Might be, and I think nowadays with SRE and Google in particular, we sort of do work or projects on a quarterly basis. So you might be doing something very different, like every quarter. So it forces you to learn something new, right? You might be watching a new stack you've never seen before, and you have to get up to speed to be able to sort of deliver on that project. So that definitely helps in that sort of continuous learning, right? Because you have to be working on the same thing for a year long, where you sort of get stuck. You generally have to pick up something new every now and then. So that's sort of how I keep up to date on that.
Yeah. No, I think also because the technology is changing so fast. Even for those that went to school or finished a bachelor's degree, I mean, my degree is so irrelevant in this world right now. So irrelevant, right? What I learned last year, some of it is already going away. I'm in the cloud space. It changes so fast, so fast. So, the ability to learn is something that I'm always looking for when I hire, because you can't be constant. You have to continue. I like what you said, Andy. You have to be learning every day or learning something new every week. Because there's just no, oh, I learned that in school, so therefore I'm going to apply it. Like a degree right now is just a checkbox. It doesn't. I don't know that it helps you more than that. Makinde, what of you? I feel like you're in this very intensive, I would say, security. Like when I think of security, I think of, oh my god, cybersecurity. I'm like, yes, we need these people because I know nothing about it. How do you keep up to date with? I'm assuming there's certifications as well, that you have to take to make sure that you're continuing to be at the top of the game. What are some of the things that you do continually to keep top shape?
I think it's probably it's gonna apply in every other field. Just like Andy said, I think it's just making sure you learn every time. I think two things would be self-reflective and honest to yourself. That's one thing I do to myself. Like, I show up at meetings. Security is an interesting space because you have to secure everything, which means you need to know something about everything, right? Like, it's not, I don't just get to secure only networks, I get to secure an application that I don't even know what you're building, and then you show up at those meetings or you see that project design and you know nothing about it, and just being honest to yourself that, what, I don't know this thing. And instead of just trying to bamboozle your way through it, a very quick Google search. What is this? It's going to start off that so just being curious and very quickly, some of these things when you say learning, it doesn't, for those watching, it doesn't always mean that you're spending like 4 or 5 hours learning something. Sometimes it could be a 5 minutes thing, like, hey, quickly, what is Docker? I don't know what Docker is. What is it? Right. And it kind of gives you the idea behind it, and then maybe if you think that it's something that, oh, I really should dig deep into this, then you can spend some more time later in your spare time to do that. So I do that a lot. Also, I don't I don't pass off an opportunity to take an opportunity. So what I mean by that is, if there is an opportunity to do something, I wouldn't pass off that chance to take off that opportunity. So if you're in a team or in a company and they're doing something, volunteer yourself. Don't not volunteer because you don't know. Actually be more interested in volunteering because you don't know, because that's going to be the chance for you to learn something. So every time something is unknown and there is an opportunity to just kind of learn from it, I always volunteer myself, and then that helps me to learn, right? And
Yeah.
between all of those things, you just kind of learn a lot. And then sometimes too, in the course of writing a certification exam, you're trying to learn a whole lot of things that lead to that certification exam. So that is also another learning opportunity. And kind of just to touch on the school conversation that was going on, kind of feel the same way sometimes. Like, no one has ever asked me to show them my degree or even my certificate ever in any interview. Like, I literally could not have any of these degrees and certificates, and I will probably still get through as long as I know what I'm talking about. So I think one thing school does is school teaches you how to learn. Like, at the end of the day, that's really what school does. It just teaches you how to learn, and then sometimes it gives you the basics, right? It just gives you the basic of how things work. So, let's use car manufacturing, for example. If you're a mechanical engineer and you learned in the 80s, you're going to figure out how cars work, what the carburetor does, what the rotor does, and all those basic concepts. Cars have changed now. They're making Tesla. They're making, all these things now. But the concept of rotors hasn't gone away. They're still using rotors in cars and all these things. So that's just the same way with IT. Like, you're going to figure out, if you go to school for IT, you're going to learn how, let's say, as a software developer, you're going to learn data structures. You're going to learn conditional statements. Those are the basics, and it would always be relevant, at least for the foreseeable future. And then that's all the basics they're going to teach you. And then the other things going on from there, it's kind of up to you to learn. So I just think it just gives you that base to kind of learn some things and then go from there. And that's really what school does. And probably that's still the case for those who still, want to go for a 4-year degree or 2-year college degree or anything. It's still worth it, and it helps you to learn. So
Yeah. No, I think very, very good point. I think learning is like a must-have. You have to continue, unless you're going to be stale, if you will, very, very soon. So I definitely agree with you. Guys, if you guys have questions, please post them in the chat. We're going to kind of wrap up very soon, so I want to make sure that I give you space to answer for Makinde and Annie to answer the questions that you guys have top of mind. But I want to go back to kind of the beginning, right? So this idea that you guys are not software engineers, right? Can you paint a picture of a day in the life of, let's start with Andy. A day in the life of Andy. You wake up at 5 a.m. and you sleep at 8 p.m. Like, day to day, like, how is your day? When you wake up, what do you do? Give us like an idea of your day. So for those in the call that are interested in maybe a field, they can actually kind of a little bit envision themselves doing what you do.
Yeah. I am a morning person, but I do not wake up at 5. You can find me around 8, maybe closer to 9, slowly rolling in. I generally reserve my mornings for meetings.
Okay. Do you work from home or do you go into the office? I know there's a pandemic, but usually, are you going to the office or are you at home?
I'm at home.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So most of my mornings are reserved. At least when I can, I put on my meetings in the mornings, follow-ups on conversations and things like that that were happening from the previous week. And most of the time, this is where I respond to comments in docs or try to get some at least ideas on docs flowing and things like that. But most generally, I spend that morning just in general, just getting up to speed. What happened? What's about to happen? And I also have sort of a sheet that it's in Keep now, Google Keep. So I have a list of things that I need to do.
To-do list.
Yeah. Usually compile that list from the previous week or the morning or sort of beginning of the week, just so I have some sort of compass of what I need to get done and something I can sort of circle back to and check myself against. And I also sort of have another one that I just keep track of what have I done so far today, right? That also generally helps. But most of my afternoon is sort of where I do focused work. So I book my calendar. I try not to take any meetings during that time. And sort of just focus on things I need to do. So this is generally where I will, spend most of my time writing docs or quote unquote writing code. I don't do that as often nowadays, but generally that's sort of where I spend most of my time trying to get core part of my work done.
Okay.
For the day.
So and the core part of your work, just from what you said, is monitoring stuff, making sure nothing breaks down. If something breaks down, making sure that you contact somebody, like things like that. That's kind of the core.
So that's more on the passive side. We in SRE we have monitoring systems, right? So we don't have someone actually looking at
Okay.
things break. But generally, I guess this is more for projects that you're working on. You generally have to look at some stack. I think recently I've been working on our release stack. How do we release software for a specific system?
Okay.
I spent some time sort of looking at previous designs and looking at what Google supports now, because that changes quite a bit and there are quite a few options. Which of them works best for this scenario, instead of just thinking about the trade-offs and things like that, and writing a doc to sort of justify that whole idea. So I probably look at monitoring things and stuff like that, but not just to look at if something is breaking or something is going to break.
Okay.
We try to automate that part of our jobs. But yeah, most of the time it is sort of just generally. I can't quite believe how much docs I write these days, but yes, I do.
Docs like documentation. When you say docs.
Yes.
Okay, documentation. Okay.
Being a design doc or things like that. But this present quarter, this is sort of what my work requires.
Okay. So a lot of writing.
Yes.
Fun. And then when do you end your day? 8 o'clock or 2 o'clock? Like when are you done?
Working from home has made that very, very difficult. I try to be as organized as possible, but on average, I end my day around 6 p.m.
Okay.
But depending on what I have going, I may push that a bit more into the late hours.
Okay.
I do not condone that behavior, but sometimes it's just to get through the same things. So, but yeah, I generally try to cut off around 6 p.m. give or take.
Okay. Sounds good. I like it. And you're in bed at?
Midnight, maybe later.
Okay. Yeah. So you watch who was the soccer person? It was Makinde. Okay. Catch up on life, basically.
Yes.
From after work to that's important. I think that's very important. So sounds good. I mean, I think you have a good lifestyle. Like it's not bad. It's 9 to 6, maybe on a good day, right? For those that are listening. But an SRE at Google, I think that's a nice life. That's not the hours I have. So I like it. Makinde, what about you? Wake up to go to bed. What does your day look like?
I am not a morning person at all. I wake up like 8 o'clock and I probably roll into work somewhere between 9 and 10.
Really?
And then I just, I roll into work somewhere between 9 and 10. I would say I leave the house like 9, and then depending on traffic, get to work maybe 9:30 or 9:40 or something, and then I would say up until lunchtime, noon, I would just catch up on emails, catch up on any lingering messages or things that need my attention, clean up my inbox and all of that kind of stuff. And then, probably go for lunch just before the day starts. I have not worked yet, right? And then after lunch, that's when I start real work. So I usually start my real work like around 1, somewhere between 1 and 2. And I start to, do the real security work, review designs, for those teams where you've already kind of pointed out the security issue for them. Sometimes they're unclear about what the fix is or how to go about it. Then, it takes some time to explain that, or sometimes to prove it. Sometimes like, I don't believe what you said is true, so I got to prove it to them. So it kind of takes some time to do that investigation, maybe go to the lab, try to test out some attacks or something like that. What else would I do? There might be in the afternoon there might be a couple of meetings. They typically would be meetings, of course. So, you kind of context switch there with all those meetings. And then I usually work late, to be honest. I kind of leave the office when we used to be in the office somewhere between 7 and 8. Okay. So I typically work that late. So I kind of finish up work again. So I think I kind of break it into 2 phases of being busy. I kind of do 1 to 3, and then somewhere between 3 and 5 will be like meetings and just mentally kind of just doing easy things, routine things. And then somewhere when everyone has left the office and things are quiet, I kind of pick up again and do some real work then. About 8, then I kind of end my day, and then I'll go home, try to catch up on life, watch the highlights of Champions League, all that kind of stuff, and then if I'm doing any studying for an exam or something, I do that late into the night. So somewhere from like 10 to 12, I'll do like my reading or anything I'm trying to do from a personal development standpoint, and then I usually go to bed somewhere between 12 and 1, thereabouts. Yeah.
So Makinde, you really work 2 to 8. I just it's so real.
6 hours, I think that's kind of good.
With snacks and all that. It's so interesting. I'm actually going to share mine. I wake up, I'm a morning person. It's so funny. By the time you start working, Makinde, which I would say is 2 o'clock, maybe even 3 because you're Nigerian. It's like, yeah, you're putting it up a little bit. I'm done working.
Oh, wow.
I wake up at 6. I'm on my computer at 8 o'clock for sure. I have meetings. I'm in sales, so I'm meetings back to back the whole day. But the core, if I have to do work, like by that I mean I have to focus. I have to get a certification done, whatever. It's going to be in the morning. It has to be in the morning because my brain is dead literally after 2 o'clock. Any meeting after that, I'm on Instagram. Literally, like, hi, like, very distracted. And then, obviously I still have to work. I work maybe to 7, but it's not as heavy as what I've done in the morning. So I find your approach very, very interesting. Rolling out of
I'm the opposite. Like I'm more of a night person. I work better when things are quiet. So I like to do it when people are done and people are not there. In the morning time when everyone is rushing to the office, I also hate to hit the traffic. So I don't want to deal with all the traffic and then when you walk into the office early in the morning, if I ever have a meeting early and I show up there's all the chit chat that I don't want to have. Like all that. Hey, how was your day? How was the weather and all that stuff? Sometimes I just want to do those.
It's like just
I don't want to spend time with that. Yeah.
So very interesting, these people. All right, cool guys. Let me see what's going on in the chat. Hillary, great talk we're having here. I am really getting insights. Thank you to the organizer. My question is, you know what, Hillary, if you're on the call, I will let you come off mute to ask your question. If not, I'm happy to read it as well.
Hi, please,
Yes.
you can do well to read it. I actually didn't want to on my mic.
Okay, I can read it.
Mistakenly got on. But yeah, so I'm on now. Thank you, guys. Thank you, ADBC. Thank you, Makinde and Andy. Really, really, wow. I'm really wild seeing that you could actually work outside of Nigeria. I'm in Nigeria. You could actually work outside of Nigeria. Nobody's going to ask you about a certificate and all. But like you said, the knowledge is very important. So the question I asked in the chat box is, I see you guys are talking about cybersecurity. Both of you are in the cybersecurity space. Are there other non-coding tech stuff or field that one could get into aside the cybersecurity? That's my question. Thank you.
You guys can answer. I also have a perspective, but Makinde, Andy, someone can answer.
Well, Andy is actually not in cybersecurity. So that's another field. Hillary. A couple of other fields to be in, I would say, would be. There's network. There is business analyst or data analyst kind of roles. Data scientist, where you kind of just work with data. There's also the I think business intelligence, or I will call it how do they call this thing? I'll just say those that do metrics, right? So they kind of, gather data around like performance of softwares, the performance of things, all that kind of stuff. And they kind of, data always tells you things that you don't know. So there's some of those people that do that work as well. There is also product managers and which you just manage a product. So think of it as like Microsoft Office, for example, is a product, right? And then there's a product manager that is managing expectations, what the customers want, what the developers can do, how quickly they can deliver it, all that kind of stuff. What else is in IT? There's infrastructure. I think Andy's probably somewhere in that field. A little bit of that. There's also desktop support or desktop engineering, like they call it at the big companies, where you got to keep all these computers working and all that stuff. And the server infrastructure. There is, I think that I've run out of ideas. I'm sure ADBC and Andy would have some other ones.
No, I think that's awesome. Andy, do you have?
Yeah, I think he's definitely exhausted the list of possible paths over there. I'm more on systems engineering side, so a little bit towards infrastructure. But definitely the networking piece, I think, is one of the big ones that I explored a lot. But I know this is a not SWE conversation, but I have to plug this one in here. I think the different paths to the coding that most people are used to. I think SWEs have very specific, like, coding things that they work on, like, the C++, the Java, and whatnot. But even for system engineers and maybe network engineers, there's the automation, right? Where you have Python and you have, I think, Go nowadays. These are like languages that are not exactly hardcore coding. They're more automating things that you'll do day to day, right? So maybe I might have a log file that I need to, like, look through. I'm looking for a specific field. Maybe it's 1,400 lines. I don't want to go through the entire thing. So I'd write a Python script that will look for the specific script, specific keyword, and give me what, the associated value is. So that's something that other folks work on that isn't exactly software engineering, right? It comes in handy in even like desktop engineering, network engineering. A lot of these other people are starting to dabble in that space. So I think even for the non-suite paths, there's still some coding which will be useful. And I think this is probably one of the reasons why we're having this conversation, that the world is starting to revolve around SWEs, right? Everything is sort of becoming SWE. If you're in the IT space, you have to be SWE, right? But there are a lot of other people around them who interact with them who are not exactly, directly involved, but they still have to be able to sort of speak their language, right? They may not write code day to day, but they have to be able to read some code, right? So that may still be useful for people in other career paths, even data analytics, right? They write code because you can't parse certain information with your eyes. You can't just go through everything. You have to write some automation things that do something. So I think that there's still other coding options that are not pure software engineering. So that's my 2 cents.
No, thank you so much, Makinde and Andy. I'm definitely going to put a plug for not even being in the technical side at all, right? So again, I started as a software engineer, but now I am in sales, right? You could be in marketing, you could be in product, like Makinde said. There's so many options, I think. And I think especially after you've had a computer science degree, after you've even worked as a SWE, or even in networking, right? In the business side of the world, especially I work for Microsoft, we need technical people that can speak to the customers intelligently, right? That understand their problems and can help them try to solve their problems, being technical, even if you're not like writing code every day. So there's so much you can do. You can be in marketing, you can be in sales, you can be a product manager, so much you can do. All right, so we have 2 more minutes, right? Last thoughts, Makinde, Andy, if there's one thing that you want everyone to leave with, can you share that, and then I'll go to Andy, and then we'll wrap up. If I see no questions.
That's quite interesting. I guess for everyone that is, trying to get into the IT field, just persevere, be persistent. Don't give up on the first no. Like, trust me, there's been a lot of failures along the way. Don't give up. Just keep going at it and keep being curious. Keep trying to learn something, or try to learn things you don't know. Don't believe the imposter syndrome. Like, I tell people, like, we're all just winging this thing. Trust me, like, there's no one is an expert. We're all trying to figure this thing out. So, and then when you get to the very top at companies like Google and Amazon, you'll see that others are also winging it. It's not just you, and it's not just Africans or just blacks. Like, we're all trying to just figure this thing out and make it work. So, you're all very welcome into the field, and just keep persevering and keep learning.
Love it. Thank you, Makinde. And Andy?
Yes. I think one thing that will probably carry through across all different fields is being like inquisitive and being curious and being sort of really eager to learn. And I think more than anything else, companies appreciate that skill set more than anything.
Yes.
Right? If you've learned something in the past, sure, you know that, but are you willing to pick something else up in the future? And they want that sort of adaptability from people. So being able to show that even in interviews, right? If you're naturally curious, these things come up, right? Because you will ask the interviewer a question back, and they'll be like, I didn't think about that. And they will pose other questions. And that just shows sort of your train of thought. And they can sort of, really, really appreciate that skill set. I think that's something that probably helped me the most in most of my interviews and just sort of my trajectory was just being curious, asking questions, and just sort of pushing the envelope, a little bit more.
Yeah, no, awesome. Look, guys, thank you so much for joining us. You have no idea the impact that you've just made. There are people that are going to leave this call or listen to this later and just feel very empowered, really, by what you guys have shared today. So, I was just about to say, Andy, thanks for putting your LinkedIn there. You guys can connect to Makinde and Andy. I will do the same right after the call with them. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to them on LinkedIn. This was awesome. Andy, Makinde, big thank you to you guys. And it's a wrap. We will see you guys on the next AfricodeX call. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Makinde. Bye, Andy. Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.